Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down the LSU Ole Miss game. That one's going to be absolutely crazy. I do have LSU winning by a hair, but I think it's going to be one of those that absolutely comes down to the wire and could go any which way, honestly. But let's get into the Red River Showdown because this one's awesome. There's no two ways about that. It is my favorite game in college football. It's my favorite rivalry, and frankly, it's one of those that we talk about in rivalry games often. We talk about how you got to throw the record books out. When these two meet, it totally doesn't, none of the past means anything. It matters what happens on that field at that very moment. Most of the time, that's not really the case, right? Most of the time, you can pretty much get an idea of how this game is going to go by what's happened the rest of the year. This is not one of those games. It is going to be absolutely insane. It's going to be all over the place. There's no rhyme or reason to this game other than who wants it more. That's the best that I can do of who really wins this game every year. And frankly, you can go back to 2015 when a 5-7 Texas beat a CFP-bound Oklahoma. That'll give you plenty of proof for that. So it's absolutely off the charts. It's my favorite game in college football, and it's going to be a special one. No two ways about that. I think this is going to be really, really crazy. And one of the big time things is it sounds like Malik Hawkins is going to be, obviously he's going to be the guy under center. And it's going to be a really, really tough thing for him. He's been under bright lights. He played against Tennessee in his first, game getting in there. And then went to Jordan Hare to make his first start. So he's about as battle tested as you could be as a 2-week starter. That being said, this is a totally different beast. He's walking into an absolute nightmare where you have a home field advantage on one side, then you drive 30 yards, and you're immediately in an away game. That is a totally different thing for a kid to deal with, and he's going to have to settle him down pretty quickly in this one. It does sound like Quinn Ewers will be back in this game. It sounds like he is going to go unless there's some crazy turn of events over the next couple of days, but he'd probably have to shake off some rust. Definitely a worry for Texas going into this one, but the reality is Sark does an incredible job of getting his guys into games, letting them shake off the rust early on in it, so not necessarily super worried about that playing a factor, but if Oklahoma can get to him early, then a lot of stuff changes. No two ways about that. The big thing to watch here is the OU O-line. It's not necessarily been downright bad. Let's be totally honest. Michael Hawkins has done a good job of kind of masking that issue a little bit and making them feel a little bit better about that, but the reality is it's a lot to ask for 4 quarters for them to hold up against this pass rush. Going to be really interesting to see how they play. If they play really well, if they play the best football they've played all year, they have every chance to win this game. It's just going to be really tough to do that. And then for the defensive side for OU, where are the holes? Where are the openings to exploit? Tennessee did a solid job finding those openings here and there throughout that game, but there's not going to be a lot of them. Texas has to be very careful, not force anything, make sure you're not giving this OU defense a chance because they will take it and run with it. I can absolutely promise you that. And the Oklahoma team does have some injury issues going into this game, definitely something to watch. It sounds like Deion Burks will be back, but none other wide receivers. So they're going to have a lot of guys step up. We'll talk about one of those guys here in a second, but this is a special one. Really no two ways about it. It's going to be absolutely incredible to watch this one unfold, and I think when you look back at this Saturday, I think this is going to have plenty to do with how incredible this is. Now, a lot of people are picking Texas and picking them by a lot. No two ways about that, but when you watch this game, there's plenty of energy in it regardless of who's the favorite team and how much they're favored by. But a couple of players to watch. We talked about the wide receiver woes for Oklahoma. J.J. Hester needs to be the guy. He was the leading receiver against Auburn, stepped up in a huge way in that game, but even with Deion Burks back, he has to be a huge player for them. If they can't, confuse this Texas defense, if they let them key in on Deion Burks and Deion Burks only, they're going to get dominated. That's just the reality. They have to be able to spread the ball out, and J.J. Hester is a really good option to do that with. And then Jaden Jackson is huge for this game. This defensive line for Oklahoma is solid. It's not necessarily elite. And you're going up against a really good offensive line in Texas, so you're going to have to get some push inside. Not necessarily elite, not necessarily, dominating the trenches, but at least get enough to slow down this offensive attack. You're really good against the run, and a big reason has been Jaden Jackson coming along and then those ridiculous linebackers that they have on the back end. But the reality is, I do think this is one of those games where if Oklahoma can't stop the run, if they let Texas even get over 100 yards rushing, it's going to be a really tough day for them. No two ways about that. So got to be able to plug the inside, and Jaden Jackson's the big-time guy that could do that. And then I got to talk about DeAndre Moore for Texas. I think this is one of the most important players on that offense, bar none, and I think it's not necessarily because he catches all the passes. He's one of those guys that does such a good job in the slot position, just kind of taking people out of plays, just kind of making sure that everything outside of him is working perfectly, and he opens up spaces for so many receivers. And against a defense like Oklahoma, you got to be able to scheme guys open. You're not going to be able to just outright beat them one-on-one, so you're going to have to be able to scheme them open, and DeAndre Moore is as important for that as really anyone on this team, and then obviously can make a couple of big plays in the pass game as well. Anthony Hill, this is your game. That's the reality in this one. When you play someone like Michael Hawkins, when you play a team like Oklahoma that is going to be able to extend plays and make things dangerous for you on the back end, an athletic linebacker is exactly what you need, and Texas might have one of the best in the country. He's absolutely elite, one of those guys that is just all over the field pretty much every game, and he might just have to have the game of his life in this one. He might just have to play absolutely huge for this team and definitely keep all the pressure really off this back end, because this back end is absolutely played really, really good football. If they're forced into some tough positions where they have to, guard one-on-one, maybe it gets a little bit tougher for them, but Anthony Hill can kind of make that a little bit easier for everyone involved. So, huge player for Texas the rest of the season, but especially on Saturday, has to play absolutely massive for this team. How Oklahoma can pull off this upset, you got to get after Quinn Ewers early. He made a couple of mistakes early in last year's game, and that was really all the opening that OU needed in that game. It was one of those things where Texas probably outplayed them in the majority of the second half, but OU had built up an early lead and then made the finishing play. So that was kind of the difference in that game. If they can get after Quinn Ewers, especially after him coming off an injury, they might just have the energy that they very much need, and then you can go, just win this game normally. You don't necessarily have to play this game out of yourself or do anything special. If you get a couple of mistakes from Quinn Ewers early, then you can do a lot of things that you feel very comfortable with throughout this game. So huge for them to just kind of get that one mistake, get the momentum on their side, and then ride that the rest of the way. And then you have to get multiple in the run game. The reality is this is not a very good run game. If they go straight downhill at Texas, it's going to be really tough to deal with. It's going to be one of those things that Oklahoma's going to look up at halftime and only have 30 yards rushing, and they're going to have to figure out where they stand. But the reality is you can get pretty creative. Gavin Sawchuk, Javonte Barnes, Michael Hawkins, all really talented players, all guys that can do really dangerous things in the run game. You got to be able to give them time. You got to be able to give them openings, and this offensive line has to play really good football. That's really what this game comes down to for Oklahoma. So at the end of the day, what those five guys do up front is probably what Oklahoma's going to do in this game, and then make momentum plays. That's the reality of this one. Whenever you walk into a game as a 14-point underdog, especially in a rivalry game like this, you're going to need a couple of big ones. You're going to need a couple of big plays, a couple of turnovers, a couple of things that just get this crowd involved, totally silence the other side of the stadium, and make you feel a lot better about where you're at. So when you walk into a game like this, there's very little reality where Oklahoma is going to be able to walk in there, play their style of game, not go out of themselves at all, and not make any big-time plays in turnovers and that type of stuff and win this game. That's just probably not going to be the way it goes about business. Now, if OU can make a couple of those big-time momentum plays, a lot changes very quickly, obviously. So that's going to be a huge thing for this team, and if they can make those, then maybe we're looking up in the second half and OU is up by 7, up by 10, and Texas is trying to fight back. But on the Texas side of things, kind of going against what we said about Quinn Ewers, you got to get out in front in this game. The Texas team, punched Michigan in the teeth in the second game of the season, and that was absolutely huge. Frankly, that was probably where the game was won. It felt like that defense had absolutely no answer for this offense, and it really put them in a position where they kind of had to start forcing stuff on the other side of the ball. If Texas is leading in this game, if they're up 14-0 before OU can look up at the scoreboard, OU is going to start doing things that they're not super comfortable doing. They're going to start forcing the ball into some windows. They're going to start doing some things that are not necessarily the way they want to go about business, and that's when Texas defense will roll. So that's the reality. They need to get out in front. They need to play this game from the lead and get Quinn Ewers comfortable is another huge part of this, obviously. And then keep Michael Hawkins at home. Just make sure this kid does not get out of the pocket, because he is dynamic. He is so much fun to watch when he gets out of the pocket, and his time to throw, 3.38 seconds. So he can extend plays. It's not necessarily because his offensive line has been playing all that much better, but at the end of the day, he can definitely extend plays, and they very much need him to do that. He's also 27th in the country in quarterback scrambles. So he's absolutely going to be a guy that extends plays, that makes life difficult for you. If you keep him at home, if you keep him in the pocket, he's not going to beat you. That's just the reality of who he is right this second. He very much could develop into an elite passer, but probably not going to be in this game on Saturday. So he very much needs to get out of the pocket, and then Texas very much needs to keep him at home. If they force him to beat him with his arm, OU's not going to win this game. And then for Texas, mix up the tempo and the personnel groups. This really just is kind of an overarching thing for this Texas offense, frankly. mix things up. This Oklahoma defense is far too good to be playing with fire the way that a lot of times they did last year. You have to make sure you rotate guys in, keep guys healthy, make sure that you're just kind of imposing your will from start to finish and playing around with a lot of different things, making Brent Venables a little bit uncomfortable. And that's the way you're really going to get this defense. You're not going to get them just playing them straight up because they're a nightmare to deal with straight up. That's just the reality. So you're going to have to mix things up, whether that's tempo, personnel groupings, just play calls in general. You're going to have to play around with a lot of things if you're Texas, and then just hope that this Oklahoma defense shows you some gaps that you didn't necessarily see before. So this is an incredible game. It's my favorite game in college football. I don't see that changing anytime soon, frankly, because every time I watch it, I absolutely love something different about it, and it's as special as it possibly could be. I don't know if this one's going to be all that fun. I'll be totally honest with you guys. I do think Texas is going to win this game fairly comfortably. Now, Oklahoma has every ability to walk in there and get a win. I don't want people acting like, Texas is going to roll over them, and if they don't, it's an absolute failure. Walking into that Cotton Bowl is an absolute nightmare. There's so many different things that could happen in that game, and there's so many different things that could go wrong in that game for Texas that, you could find an opening. I mean, last year going into this game, whether it was right or not, probably not right. But at the end of the day, not a lot of people were giving Oklahoma a shot. They came out there and won the game. And then in 2015, if you want to go back and watch that game, those are two wildly different teams. And Texas somehow found a way to win. So at the end of the day, this one comes down to who's willing to lace them up, strap up their chin strap, and then go to work. That's the reality of this game. Who wants it more? Who's going to play a little bit harder? And who's going to make that one play? When everyone else is tired, who's going to run down that ball? Who's going to make that 50-50 play that totally changes this game? But at the end of the day, I don't know if it's going to really come down to that. I do think Texas is going to make the plays that they need to make. I do think they're going to play this one from the lead, and Oklahoma is just not going to have the offensive line that they need to have in this game to get this win. But it's going to be an incredible game. I absolutely love this game every single year. Cannot wait for it to get going, and it's going to be awesome. No two ways about that. It's just another addition to this incredible weekend, and we'll break down a couple more tomorrow when we have some big-time games. Obviously, Ohio State, Oregon will take the cake there, but we'll take our second break here, and Andre, we will actually talk about that Tennessee game. It's a little bit of a spot. We'll talk about that right after this, so stick with us.